it's almost magic to know the conditions that they were living with, the material they were using to be able to execute such intense artwork, you know?
At what point do you find yourself in Florida,
Wow.
and for what reason?
Yeah, strangely enough, I had a friend that was a few years older than me. He was going to a digital, um, like a digital school there for like production, also music. It was just like kind of one of these creatively trade schools that they used to have like in the mid 2000s. And he actually had an apartment. I knew him from where I was from, and he had an opening for a room. So I just moved down there on a whim when I was 17, and I moved in with him. That's just kind of, I had no job, no family, nothing lined up there. I just, like we said earlier, I was just trying to get out. And that was my very first way to escape.
Were you going to school? Were you working? What'd you do out there?
Yeah, I actually worked my first year, and then I enrolled in Art Institute. It was the Art Institute of Design, and it was in Miami. So I actually was living in Orlando, but going to school in Miami. So I would naturally take the bus at like 6 in the morning, 4 hours to Miami, take my courses from 10 all the way till 6 p.m. And then I would just like take that Greyhound back from Miami to Orlando. So I did that for 1 year,
How many days a week?
three.
And for somebody that doesn't know, that might be about 3 hours away, 3 hours
Oh,
away.
three on the best day. It's definitely a 4 hour trip every day for up and back for me. Yeah, it was difficult to find housing in Miami, but I was still being able to make that trip to go to the school at the time.
Do you feel like the school was it worth it? Like,
Ah, man, I think it's not necessarily to say that it wasn't worth it because there were contacts and I learned a lot of valuable lessons, but as in things that I could utilize inside of my career currently, it wasn't really, I didn't really get too much from it that I'm utilizing today, like in the actual work, the physicality of it, to understand art because I was an art history major. So I was doing like a lot of, it was basically history class, so I was able to like really see a lot of relation of artists and their work so that I can kind of like look back on now. But I didn't, for the practice, it was not so much.
okay. So like sometimes when I speak with artists, there's always a not always, but usually comes up at some point whether or not school or art history or any of these things are actually um, necessary. You you were you said it was like history class.
Right, right.
Other than the contacts that you may have made, was having the knowledge about the art history, do you find that useful, or did you try to utilize that to work in a museum or anything like?
No, I really didn't. I really didn't. And then I was I was very overwhelmed because I wasn't understood of exactly what took for an art history degree. And it was way above anything that, I was able to successfully finish. So I think that not being able to finish the degree was just because I wasn't learning anything that was really going to forward me to where I was going, I think. But, a lot of, yeah, it's really connection based, I think, from my point of view.
Do you do you have a favorite part of art history?
Ah,
Something that you really took to?
yeah, I mean, again, learning the stories and just knowing how what like the conditions, right? As artists, we're very fortunate today, as in the current. So it's like nice to know that it's almost magic to know the conditions that they were living with, the material they were using to be able to execute such intense artwork. Before it was like this kind of thing to do as a creative. It was more of a it was something more holy, I think, towards doing it and with those kind of terms, you know. So that was really nice to understand what people had to go through to be able to like create work and ultimately allow me to be able to do what I'm doing today.
When you look back at history and you go into like a museum, they have these massive paintings.
Right.
And I mean, at some point, I think the Impressionist paintings started to become smaller. What was there a purpose for these paintings, or were people just like, I'm inspired and I want to draw Napoleon, or was it like,
Yeah, and I think a lot of it from my point of view was kind of in the senses there wasn't you know, photo. So a lot of these older oil paintings, a lot of that you see of portraiture and things of this nature were just to really have this as like, you know, a collection, to have this visual representation of family members, of important people. I mean, that can go all the way back to art on cave drawings or statues where the Great Pyramids are. These are ways to like remember a lineage and remember people that were important, I believe.
what were these artists being commissioned? Do you know
I
about
think a
that?
lot were, definitely. Definitely in Europe, in the royal arts, you know, those schools are way old, older than this country, you know. So I think a lot of those people, kings and queens and people that had money were definitely paying to have their portraits commissioned for sure. Yeah.